Richard Zhang, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Peter.
So it's really cool to have somebody who's the head of digital at Electric Hydrogen. Those are not things that you hear in the same sentence very often. Tell us about your day to day and your journey in coming to electric hydrogen and your journey in digital.
Yes, absolutely. So it's definitely been a very fun journey, kind of like finding our way into electric hydrogen. So about 3 years ago, I was a co-founder at Lift H2, which essentially focused on the midstream of building ultra heavy duty refueling infrastructure for the mining companies, rail, marines, right? This was basically at the beginning of the latest hydrogen boom, where, lots of companies are starting to invest into these more heavy duty hydrogen use cases, right? And then the market gap that we saw back then is that there's no integrator out there, right? So you still have a market with, very new technology being constructed or being sort of designed by either startups or the spin-offs from gigantic company like the ExxonMobil and the Shell of the world, right? But there is no one really packaging everything and filling the gaps of the in-between. So as part of Lift H2's mission, the digital team was started to say, hey, we're looking at all these moving parts. So maybe there's a good opportunity for us to get all that data and then really start to optimize how we operate all these different assets in a way that can connect hydrogen to renewable energy, right? And to really give you that kind of more optimal operation schedule to kind of almost increase the agility of your hydrogen asset. So that's kind of where I started, at least for my current journey 3 years ago. And then last August or September timeframe, lots of market shifts and changes. And me and my team were fortunate enough to get essentially acqui-hired by Electra Hydrogen. So that is about 6 months ago. So that's how I landed in Electra Hydrogen. And since then, I would say Electra Hydrogen has been providing a very fresh perspective, right? So my interaction with hydrogen started at Shell, where I was mostly focusing on the downstream, right? So there's a lot of refilling stations, close collaboration with the vehicle manufacturers, right? And then at Lyft was midstream, and now electric hydrogen, it's the upstream of hydrogen generation. So really give you that kind of full journey.
Oh,
And
that's awesome. Yeah. Full journey. Now you started downstream, which is good
yeah,
because then you went through the whole thing. So continue.
absolutely. And I think the sort of benefit of being able to see this from end to end is it gives you fresh perspective, right? It gives you an opportunity to kind of challenge your assumptions of how things really should be working. And I think electric hydrogen has been really fascinating, learning and growth space for me personally, especially when looking at a company dedicated to build the world's most powerful electrolyzer, right? So at electric hydrogen, we only make 100 megawatt cell scale electrolyzer. So when most people on the market are still looking at 1 megawatts or even 10 megawatts, demo projects, electric hydrogen are already saying, we see the vision of where the future needs to go in order to really accomplish our climate vision, right? And we know at that point in time, we need solutions that are built from the ground up, cost engineered all the way from the top to the bottom to be able to hit specific economics, right? And to get to reasonable unit costs to kind of really make hydrogen competitive. So with that vision, the founder has done a tremendous job, right? Rafi and Dave, the rest of the co-founders at Electric Hydrogen all came from First Solar. So they brought a lot of that vast knowledge in terms of how to make manufacturing work, right, in the States, and then how to really bring that sort of up-down cost engineering to bring a viable solution to the markets. So for us, from a digital team perspective, it's just been fascinating witnessing how we transition or transform as an organization from R&D focus into we're now building up our gigafactory in Devens, Massachusetts, to now we have announced our first customer deployment by the end of the year with New Fortress Energy. So again, it's that sort of full life cycle perspective that is really giving me and our team a lot of opportunity to explore how can data and AI play into this whole conversation to help us kind of get to where we need to go faster and cheaper.
Oh my gosh. We're going to have a long talk today because there's so many things to unpack there, right? So I'm going to go to the New Fortress conversation. That sort of hits me up. Those guys are smart guys, right?
Yes.
And if they're deploying your technology, tell us about that project as much as you can. And would love to know sort of where it is, what they're doing, and what's the vision there. Because I know those guys don't do anything with pie in the sky. They're going to actually do it for real if they announce it.
Yes, absolutely. So I can share from what I've learned, right? Also in my sort of beginning of my journey here is that New Forge Energy, like you said, has been a tremendous partner, right? So they really saw what the team can deliver and the promise of the technology. And they found the electro hydrogen solution as the stepping stone towards where they need to be in the market to lead in, renewable cheap hydrogen space. So I think this was one of those cases where, the company's vision really come to fruition. It found its, early partners. And then we have partners who also have that, technical depth to be able to evaluate why this particular technology is better than everyone else on the market, right? And be able to find a unique opportunity to say, let's just get it done, right? Get the first project done in this particular location. And then this will really help New Fortress Energy to also create that story, right, for its customer and to ultimately kind of bring the whole picture together. So from what I've heard, it's been, a fantastic project.
And no, that's good. That's good to know. And, always the challenge with hydrogen is getting a buyer, right? Getting an
Yes.
off taker. So we know that transportation can be a good market. Do you know where New Fortress is going to use the hydrogen, what markets they're going to use it in?
Yeah. So New Fortress has announced this sort of zero emission industrial park project. So it will be a variety of off takers for the green hydrogen that will be produced there. But just kind of take a step back, looking at the sort of general markets of off taker who can actually utilize a 100 megawatt scale electrolyzer. I'll say from what I've seen, the predominant off taker are essentially falls into a few categories, right? Mobility or transportation, as you mentioned, has definitely been a very promising end, right? Especially I think since 2019, 2020, there's a lot of investments that went into transportation and to kind of make mining truck work, right? Or to kind of really make medium to heavy duty transportation to start to transition into hydrogen. But at the same time, we're also seeing very different degrees of adoption based on which market you're at. So at least from the United States perspective, the aggregated market size for someone to take 100 megawatt scale for electrolyzer is probably not there yet in the next like 2 to 3 years, right? The second category is mostly all have everything related to ammonia and fertilizers, right? And I think this is really where we saw the biggest opportunity in terms of there are existing ammonia synthesizer plants, right? And they're already leveraging all of those green hydrogen or however these producer gets their hydrogen. So that can be a very direct drop in, plug and play sort of deployment if we can make our technology work. So I would say in the next 2 to 3 years, and this not just from my personal experience, but also talking with people within the industry from the utility side, right? I think this is really where people can, start to find immediate use case or have a reason to kind of pay for this type of investment to make that project work is mostly around ammonia production. And then obviously the third type is all has everything to do with natural gas, right? To kind of inject hydrogen into their natural gas pipeline. I think you'll see on the news, there are all kinds of test projects, right? Try to blend in all the way to 10%, 20%. And you have community pushback, I think in the case of California, to say 20% is dangerous. So there's definitely still a lot of, when it comes to public infrastructure, a lot of public education and sort of social movement that needs to happen. But from a technology perspective, we have seen a lot of valid use cases, right? For blending hydrogen and helping utilities get to their decarbonization goals. And I think another thing that a lot of people don't realize within even the natural gas industry is that the technology to kind of leverage 100% hydrogen, right, from the turbine for, to kind of hydrogen to electricity gas generation has actually been pretty mature, right? So the technology itself is actually not the issue. And depending on who you ask, based on which part of the decade in the last 50 years they worked on this technology, they'll give you a different answer to say why it didn't take off last time. But I think from what we're seeing is the technologies there, the cost is getting close, right, to kind of the target to make these sort of project work. So hopefully that can also be a major off-taker market in the next 3 to 5 years.
And that's right. And I'll share that we have friends at Baker Hughes, we have friends at Siemens, we have friends at Mitsubishi,
Yeah.
and they're talking about 100% hydrogen in a gas turbine already, which is
Yeah.
amazing to me that it's advanced this fast that they could do
Absolutely.
that. And
Yes.
a lot of people don't know how much hydrogen a gas turbine would take,
Yeah.
right? So I feel like that's a great solution for offtake. I agree. agree with you on the near term ammonia applications. If we can get sort of greening ammonia, that would be great. So good. I appreciate you sharing that. I would love to transition into digital now,
For sure.
um, and understand sort of what is the role of somebody in digital at a
Yeah.
hydrogen company. What does your day to day look like, and where do you see the role of digital in the future of energy generally?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this is also something that poses a unique, fun challenge for us as software engineers working in a hardware company, right? Is in the end, the final product is the hardware. So we always need to kind of find these unique interfaces with the hardware and the people working around your core products, right? And to try to find places where you can maximize your business value proposition of the digital solution, the data platform that you're working on. So for us, the day to day is really, quite a wide variety in terms of project we're working on. As I was alluding to before, our team is really looking after the whole life cycle of the product development process, right? So we have product dedicated to the R&D process where we're kind of creating solution to help the scientists, right? Kind of work more efficiently to kind of better leverage the data they're seeing when doing all the way from membrane cell level testing to, try to test the multiple configuration of the same stack. So that has been one of the first products that's been created within EH2, right? And then we're moving recently towards the whole gigafactory build out. And for me, before I had the sort of opportunity to deploy digital solution at a mature factory, but I've also never been part of kind of creating a new factory from the ground up. And this really opens up this whole blue sky world of you have all these equipment, right? You're defining the process. How can we start to collect data from the ground level up, right? And from day one, essentially, and to leverage all of those data for your long-term predictive maintenance, right? And the ultimate goal, I think this is one of the persuasive power of Elon Musk, right? Is to tell the story of Tesla to say if a wheel somehow broke down on the street, right? We need to be able to trace it back to the factory and to that particular machine that manufactured that wheel. So this is the type of use case that you see as very common for software in the hardware industry, right? Try to bring the sort of coherence into all the data you collected, and then try to kind of start to really create a traceable track record, right? In terms of understanding what exactly happened. And then we move on towards the more customer facing ends, right? So as the customer are buying essentially a gigantic product, so or hardware, we also need to kind of pair that up with the software services. Sometimes the software is there in order to kind of just provide a interface for customer services and support. But for digital, especially for hydrogen, is that if you compare the similar scale hydrogen project with solar or wind, what a lot of people don't realize is hydrogen project generates 100, sometimes 1,000 times more data. And the reason why is that hydrogen projects are kind of an interesting blend between a classic renewable energy project and a sort of chemical refinery plant, right? Because it's a gas. And you need to operate it in a more sort of traditional oil and gas way. And you also need many more sensors to be able to monitor, right? The amount of hydrogen you're generating. It just takes a lot of sensoring and sort of protective measure in order to get down to what is actually happening in your equipment. So that has really posed a very interesting challenge, right? How do you collect that data from sometimes the most remote region in the globe, right? Usually you don't deploy hydrogen to someone with, splendid internet connection, so to speak. So that has, traditionally been a very interesting challenge for us to solve. And then once you collect all of those, extremely high frequency data, how do you start to kind of really leverage it so that your scientists and your field technician can both utilize that same data to make sense of what's happening and then come up with the next preventive maintenance solution or to kind of start to track issues through your FreeCAS process, right? All of that tying data together with the human action and the machine itself has been, I would say, the most fun part of the job.
No, that's amazing, and I hear you on predictive maintenance. That's I think an exciting area. One of the reasons why wind and solar have been so popular is because they have minimal maintenance costs. But wind and solar can only get us so far. We have to go into these more exotic types of facilities, like hydrogen, like chemicals, green steel,
So
these different types of applications. So those facilities all require lots of maintenance. And in order to make them cost effective, we're going to need predictive maintenance. I imagine some kind of IoT interface with software. Maybe talk us through how you see that future go in predictive maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a part of the same story in terms of cost engineering, right? So a main reason why a new company like Electra Hydrogen started only 3 years ago, and now there's 330-ish people, can kind of deliver this sort of rapid technology innovation is kind of along the same series of a lot of the sort of commercial off the shelf, components, parts have been good enough, right, to be deployed for industrial use cases. So for some of the more legacy manufacturer, a lot of the technology or the parts has been sort of engineered in a way that these kind of cheaper, more off the shelf solution just simply aren't available, right? So by sort of doing this research and manufacturing all the way from the ground up, you can really start to achieve, extreme amount of high cost saving once you deliver a modular solution and products in the end. So this actually is the same story for software. So when we look at how a hydrogen plant is operated and maintained, right? It is, again, you are sort of constantly monitoring that data. It's not the same as you can sort of just leave your solar panel or your wind turbine out there and then sort of monitor every 5 minutes or sometimes even an hour. That tends to be the dominant data frequency for the off-the-shelf solution. For hydrogen plant, you really do benefit from these millisecond level data frequency, right? Especially when you're electrolyzing for, at high current density, you can really start to collect those data in order to make sense of what my individual cell within my stack is actually doing. Are they performing against my ideal physical models, right? What is the level of degradation I'm seeing every single time I start to use my stack to electrolyze hydrogen? And this type of solution really brings a big challenge for the software team, right? So when you look at what you can buy from the current incumbents, right, from the Siemens, the Schneider, the Honeywell of the world, a lot of the solution that you get are still around operation monitoring, right? So what that means is they can provide like SCADA system or HMI solutions for your technician in the plant to be monitoring that data, right? And most of the solution they provide hasn't really been designed with the mindset that every single data point that's been generated from your plant can actually be leveraged for data analytics or AI developments much down the line, right? So a part of a very fun sort of learning experience in this industry is how to bridge those two fields together, right? Where your operation engineer and your maintenance engineer really need to just kind of get something done, right? They want to keep the plant running and they can't really sort of pay for the cost of just take even 5 more seconds just to write something down so that your data scientist down the line can actually understand what happened there or what caused your baseline to change, right? So kind of helping them to see the benefits that a single 5 second, a minute more spent here and there on documentation can bring them a tremendous amount of long-term cost saving or preventing downtimes is always, I think, the sort of center of the story, right? Is how can we make that happen? And then in this whole process, what we've also seen from the last 3 to 5 years of cloud development and AI technology advances is that most of the solution you get off the shelf, right, directly from the cloud providers like AWS, Microsoft, Google Cloud, has been really good enough to be able to support this type of data frequency, right? So what you can see from some of the sort of more earlier days, 2005, 2010 technology solutions that's been devised in that decade is mostly still using a lot of custom made components, so to speak, right? Still a lot of custom algorithms. Still, we have to really get down into how much data we want to compress, right? What is the amount of data point I want to store away? But modern technology has really got us to the point where you don't need to kind of make that decision anymore, right? Lossless compression to collect your data from a gigantic plant like a hydrogen electrolyzer and to be able to stream all that data back to the cloud has been extremely cost competitive, which kind of really opens up a new sort of capability, right? To allow your team to say, I can take all the data that's ever been generated. I don't really need to spend my time and attention on cost engineering down that particular part because that's no longer a big component of my final cost to operate my system. So once all that that's stored in, how can you start to leverage that data to pair that with some of the latest, generative AI, your large language models to kind of really combine the two together to do time series prediction? That's now the most exciting development in the field.
Incredible. So as I hear you talk about all this, I think of investment banker. I always think, who's going to win from this, right? So Number one, I would imagine whoever has data centers that's storing all of this data, this is going to generate a tremendous amount of data, an order of magnitude more data than what we're collecting today, I would imagine. Right. And then also, whoever's producing AI that can actually read this data, because no human could possibly filter all this and take action items based on that. So, whoever's doing the AI is going to win from this, I imagine. And then, of course, that is a nice full circle because who's ever generating the power that powers the AI is also going to win from this new world. And then lastly, I would imagine maybe out in the future, whoever's developing robotics that can come out and take action on this data is going to benefit as well. Would love to get your thoughts on who wins from this kind of worldview.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a great question. We used to kind of joke that we need to run a energy balance calculation, right? The amount of energy we use to train the AI and then deploy that inference on the electrolyzer itself, is that energy saved from the electrolyzer operation going to actually be worth the energy that we spend on training the AI in the first place? So I think there's still a lot of open question like that, right? The technology itself is really exciting, and we can start to see a lot of the sort of business value proposition being realized, right? A lot of these sort of promises that are made from within the software industry are starting to kind of really get to fruition within the energy market. So that has been definitely a very exciting development in the last 2 years. And I think the winners in this market from a OEM perspective, I do believe the companies who start to leverage the data or start to see the value of every single data point that can contribute to their strategy is going to be the ones that are going to have a leg up compared to the competitors. Most of the company are still in the stage of kind of spending most of their attention on getting the core technology work. And it is a hard tech industry that we're in, right? So that attention can almost never be taken away. But how can we start to add in the digital component into basically your day-to-day operations, right? And how can I arm the people who are working on the core technology to better leverage the data, right? And to show them sometimes that, as you're alluding to, eyeballing the data can't really tell you anything anymore, or I can't tell you all of the full story, right? And you really need sort of more automated algorithms or the pairing of more of that sort of advanced analytics into your workflow to be able to make sense of what's really happening. So I think companies who kind of start to see that as early as possible will have a competitive advantage. And I do think in the longer term, again, this might be because we live in the energy bubble and, have a lot of conversation going on with digital AI in general. But you do see eventually, I think 5 to the year down the line, right? All of the hardware company will need to have an AI strategy, right? The products they're creating are the solution that gets their first, batch of revenue. But as the market moves towards more rapid data collection, and as more company has go out there, proven their technology and really start to provide a whole vision and model in terms of how they can use their data to better improve their operation, everyone will want to start to get in onto the same story, right? And this is really where you can start to see, the hard, or from an investment perspective, right? To start to see these heavy assets, the composition of your revenue will start to decompose a little bit. I think my favorite story is how STEM Energy's business or revenue model looks today, right? 60% from the hardware sales and the rest all coming from software sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's continue to talk about that because I think you maybe have a little investment background. I saw on your profile some venture investing, maybe. Would love to hear about your journey in investing. And if you
Yeah.
can share some companies, we know electric hydrogen sounds like a great company. Tell us about sort of the venture journey there to the degree you can, and any other companies that you see out there that you think are making waves, let's say, in this world of energy. We talked before the call about Tesla. We'd love to see like 100 Teslas. It hasn't materialized yet, but that's my favorite word yet is who's going to be the next that comes to the fore in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think in order to come up with a thesis, right, around how to invest in the energy system, I think really it requires to kind of think about what's the ultimate goal we're trying to get to, right? So one of the quotes I really enjoy from our CEO, Rafi, in his recent interview with Forbes is that the ultimate goal for electric hydrogen, right, is to make the 45Vs, the government incentives irrelevant, right? Our goal is to kind of make hydrogen cheap enough where it can stand on its own. right? And I think, startups and companies like that who share the same vision and the same type of resources are going to the one who can, hopefully get there faster and sooner than everyone else. And in terms of the specific list of companies, so I think electric hydrogen has had this, great benefit or has the privilege of getting invested by all these big names in the energy VC world, right? Everyone from Breakthrough Venture to all of these major technology companies from Amazon, right? And then from the oil and gas companies like BP, all of these has kind of come together to form a unique thesis, right? In terms of which companies might work. And I think the big names that's on everyone's lips, right, tend to be electric hydrogen for sure. And they're renewable materials that has been, been a sort of major, very heat topic within the investment industry, right? And I'll say the third company would be, Commonwealth Fusion. They're actually a neighbor next to our Devon's Gigafactory. So we also saw some photos and picture from them. Very exciting company, right? I think they broke some sort of fundraising records. So we also do have high hopes for that technology to work in the long run. And I will say, Form Energy, the battery manufacturing companies are also the sort of fourth category who will most likely have more opportunity than their peers in the next 2 to 5 years to kind of rapidly deploy their solution and then prove it out right to the market. If when you look at some other hard tech energy company, the deployment cycle might just take slightly longer, depending on exactly which technology readiness level they're at. But I think for battery storage, especially for grid backup energy, I think those companies will start to will start to see more of the demo projects and then the case study coming out, and we'll hopefully know which one will be the winner very soon.
Absolutely. And you hit on some themes that we love. So with hydrogen fuels, right? We have to have a zero carbon fuel in order to get to net zero. And then you hit on materials. We have to have the stuff we make has to come from net zero. Otherwise, we can't have a modern economy, right? Without concrete and cement, plastic and steel and all these materials that we use. And then lastly, storage. We have to have energy storage because people don't realize it's the one commodity that has to be consumed right when it's made today for the most part. But in the future, we have to have energy storage. So I think those are really cool themes. I'll hit a couple others. We love climate change mitigation because we think we're already kind of seeing the effects. And so anything that can help mitigate that. And then also aging infrastructure. There's so much infra out there today. And just think of water pipes that are aging that have to be replaced. So we think this energy transition in terms of infra is an amazing trend for the next, let's call it 30 years at least. Hopefully by the time we're retired, if we're still around by then. It's been great. Before I let you go, I would love to know, Richard, is there anything I should have asked you about that you'd love to touch on? Maybe you can plug electric hydrogen if you want, or anything else that I should have asked you about that you'd like to get out to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think given that today is March 19th and NVIDIA just had their big announcement yesterday.
Oh man, you hit me with that one. I was thinking of video. So tell the audience about that.
Absolutely. I think this has just been a sort of, heated topic recently, right? For anyone who has a interest in, seeing AI getting deployed in the energy market, is that the development from OpenAI, right, from the large language model or generative AI in general has been really exciting, right? And we're also seeing some real deployments, right, in natural language processing and image recognition, kind of replacing the more small model deployments from the last 10, 20 years. And they're making kind of real progress, right, in the field. And the cost has also finally got to the point where you no longer have to pay a big consulting company millions of dollars per year just to kind of get a proof of concept out, right? And we're really starting to see just the sort of citizen scientists, citizen data scientists, or citizen engineers within, companies big or small, but starting to tap into this technology and start to be able to kind of really get a day one effect, right? In terms of how that can help them transform their business. So that's been great when it comes to generative AI technology. But one thing that isn't obvious yet is how can we leverage these large language models for time series prediction, right? So within the hardware industry in particular, for energy, but also other sort of hardware manufacturing sectors in general, most of the data we'll be collecting will be time series, right? And the main difference between time series prediction and then sort of more generative language models is that time series is all about timestamps and then the specific data that you're getting, right? So it's almost like looking at your stock price charts, right? And keep trying to predict exactly what's going to happen at the next timestamp. So for most of the predictive maintenance, predictive analytics use cases, we'll be using AI to train for time series prediction rather than leveraging a lot of the sort of more language-based or generative AI models. So the very exciting development in the last 3 to 4 months has been people have come up with time GTP. And I think Google wrote this fascinating new paper about how we can really start to tokenize the time series data we collect from the field and then feed it into the large language models. And the result from this approach has finally be beating some of the golden records for time series prediction from the last, basically 50 years, right? So we're really starting to see by following this particular approach, there might be this opportunity where we can also leverage the now ubiquitous lower cost large language model and then apply that on time series prediction. It's still very early days, but I would imagine within the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to start to witness some more field deployments, right? To kind of feed our time series data into these large language models and then see what that is going to bring us.
Very good. So break it down for the novices out there. I think time series prediction, right, will make potentially manufacturing faster and advances in hardware development faster, will make predictive maintenance more effective. What are some of the other applications that this AI and time series prediction gives us?
Yeah, good question. So I think anything that generates data from, let's say, sensors or equipment are, by itself a time series data points, right? So the main use case that you've mentioned when it comes to predictive maintenance are the dominant use case where you want to start to be able to predict when is the next failure is going to happen, right? And from a performance perspective, especially for company who would like to do, let's say, performance guarantees, right? Or be able to start to get into the place where we can start to predict exactly when we're going to need the next spare parts or what's the likelihoods that we're going to need to stock up our inventory. All of these sort of operational excellence topics can benefit from having a robust time series prediction model. But I think the most interesting use case for the next, within a relatively short time horizon is going to be able to predict your core technology's performance, right? Is this going to produce the amount of energy that you specify it will produce, right? Is your time series prediction model going to line up with your physics-based model, right? So I think most of the company, especially traditional ones today, are still spending tons of hours and resources, right, to be able to build up a true sort of digital twin of their core products, right, using physics, chemistry, all of the sort of hard science-based modeling. So that typically tend to be how you generate a baseline performance profile for your product, right? And that sort of baseline can be used then to predict is your equipment in the field deviating or you're underperforming from your baseline. I think what we're going to see in the next 1 to 2 years is this sort of new approach of tokenize your time series data into these large language models, which from a fundamental first principle perspective doesn't really make any sense, but may start to kind of bring us surprising results, right? That could actually outperform or at least on par with the physics-based model. Because even if it's on par, then that saves up a lot of resourcing and amount of hour and the licensing fee you're going to pay for these physics-based simulation models.
And it's very exciting. And I think of how much it costs to get these plants built. We raise capital for new projects, and a lot of times just the feed engineering cost might be $50 million. Now, to me, that seems crazy. We should be able to put a digital twin out from a previous plant, make some changes digitally, and then have AI tell us, okay, how do we need to tweak this plant to get the output that we need? It's not that much different than what we've done before. Do we really need to spend $50 million and millions of man hours trying to figure this out? Because ultimately, all this stuff has to be built. And if we can't engineer it quicker and start construction faster, I think we're going to have challenges. So I'd love to see how AI can influence that.
Yes, you and me both.
Good stuff. Well, Rich, what is next for electric hydrogen? You told us about one deal, but what else are you guys up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully the first deal will, we'll start to see more of our next deal announcements. So stay tuned. Definitely subscribe our social media platform to stay in tune. And I think the next steps for electro hydrogen is the same for any high growth startups, right? Is to kind of keep focusing on improving the core technology and then keep getting field deployment right, keep, being obsessed with how do we service our customer better. And for at least my part of this whole journey will be to try to keep collecting more data, make sense of exactly how it's all going to be connected with like even the local weather, right? The sort of local environments variables, right? How do we all tie everything together to get better prediction of our core products? And so, I think the next few years is just going to be very heads down, keep deployment start with us.
Very good. Richard, it's been a pleasure having you on. This has been Richard Zhang with Electric Hydrogen. It's definitely a company to watch with marquee investors. Richard, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Peter.